Welcome to Dalek Diaries. In this first instalment we're looking at assembling the first component of our Dalek, which is the inner eye. This is going to be housed inside the eye, and it's all the workings for a working iris and the LED. First of all, the components. We've got three 75mm nylon bolts, nuts and washers. They're just to hold it apart. We've used nylon just for a weight basis. They were bought through eBay, about $3 for a packet of 10. We then have a collection of acrylic discs. These will form the mounting plates for the components inside the eye. These were all designed on Illustrator based on some that had previously been done by Cyberfairs from Project Dalek, and they were cut out using a laser cutter at Fab Lab in Adelaide for a cost of $5 for the acrylic, and I've got a few spares left over. Equally, these could be cut out of a piece of plastic card using a sharp knife, or out of MDF, or even a heavy duty cardboard, but I made use of the fact that I had the access to the laser cutter. It was a good learning curve. We have an iris. This is an iris out of a camera or a microscope. It's a 25mm iris. And we'll be installing that so we can get the working eye feature. We have a diffuser disc. All this is one of the central discs out of one of the templates. And it's been sanded and steel walled to be milky to break up the LED light. A couple of small screws. A little piece of plastic tubing to extend the iris arm, 3 aluminium spacers to go over the bolts to hold the plates apart, a 12 volt blue LED plate to provide the light, and a micro servo to operate the iris. About $7 or $8. This particular one was bought through Hobby King. The LED was about $5, so most of the components here, the iris was the most expensive, about $25 through eBay. Probably total interior components, about $40. The other thing we've made here is a arm for the servo. You'll see how that operates once we put it together. It's just made out of plastic. It's been glued together, and putty's been used to get a really strong, solid join so it won't break. We're going to start assembly. The first plate is this black one. It doesn't have to be black. I've used a black one to help prohibit the light from the LED so that it will only come out through the iris. As you can see, it's got 3 holes for the bolts, and it's got 3 notches cut out. The notches are cut out to fit on these tabs inside my inner eye so that it can recess. So the first thing we do is just put the bolts through. These bolts are longer than they need to be, but the intention is I will cut them down once we've got it together. Next piece we're going to place in is the iris. Before I do that, I'm just putting a small piece of plastic tubing on the end of the arm. Its purpose is solely to extend the arm a little, just to make it easier for the servo arm to grip. I'm placing it on the eye. I'm making sure it's in the position I want, my closed position. And I'm placing it on the eye around the ring, so it's central. I then take the next clear disc and it goes over the top of the eye. Now at this point, this sausage cut out here is where the action of the iris arm is going to move back and forth. So I need to position the iris around so that the arm is in the correct position. And we're literally just sandwiching that in between. It's a bit tricky, you've got to get it in the right spot. And hold it firm. It needs to be within the sausage opening. You need to make sure it's in a closed position so that when you swivel the arm, it opens. You need to make sure it's square and central on the plates before you sandwich it. The reason for this, sandwiching it, is to hold it in place. You could super glue it there. I've decided not to though, because then if I need to disassemble it to fix a part or replace a part, I'm not having to deal with super glue. The next thing we do is we pop the diffuser just into the hole that's there in the middle of the plate. Its purpose is just, as I said, to diffuse the light from the LED. The next plate we're going to work on is this one with, again, a sausage cutout for the servo arm, and this will have the LED on it. So again, we look at the positioning of the holes, pop the cord through, and in this case I'm just going to hold that in place with a bit of blue tack. Then place a couple of dots of blue tack on the back of the light, centre it up so it's nice and square, squeeze and wiggle in place. Again, you could hot glue or super glue it, but I've found in my testing that the blue tack holds it really firm, and again, if I need to replace parts, it's easier to remove. So this now goes on top. First of all though, we take these washers, drop them over each one. Purpose of these is just to provide a small... So I'm actually placing 2 washers on each of these, just to provide a little bit of spacing. Ensure everything stays square. Drop it into position. The next disc is the disc for the servo. You can see it's got the 3 holes for the nuts, the bolts, 1 hole for the servo to sit through, and a hole for the wires from the light and that to pass through. So the servo in this case goes through from the underside. Put the cord through first, get it out of the way, and drop the servo into place. And then screw it in. A couple of small screws just to hold it firmly in place. The holes for the screws had already been pre-drilled. One of the difficulties with using acrylic is it doesn't drill laser cuts very well, it doesn't drill very well after the fact. I shattered a couple of discs trying to drill extra holes. Okay, then place the servo arm on. Now we need to look at the orientation of the servo and where it's going to sit and where we want the servo arm to line up with. Which is approximately that sort of angle. Just double check it again. Get those wires out of the way. Those wires are actually going to come up through the other hole in the disc. That will then go up and through the disc above it. Okay, so the servo disc then goes on. That wire comes up through servo plate for the lights. And the notch in the servo clips on to the iris. Now at that point, what I'm going to do is just quickly test the servo to make sure I've got the arm in the right place. To do that, I just have a servo tester, a UBEC, a 9-volt battery. Just at this point, I'm going to use a 9-volt battery, but the 9-volt battery I had today is flat. So to test it, I'm just going to use this 12 volt. So we want to put it into the full neutral position, which is there, and line that up, which is going to be about right. So now place that through there. The other thing we've got to do at this point to hold it the appropriate distance is just put on these small spaces. Pop the servo arm on, apply some pressure just to clip it into place, and then tighten up the nuts. So that completes the assembly of our inner eye mechanism. Thank you for joining us on Dalek Diaries.